In their podcast, Zack to the Future, Mark Paul Gosselaar and Dashiell Driscoll discuss how this opening scene has a fun, Ferris Bueller type vibe to it. The comparison has some merit, as both boys break the fourth wall in introducing the day's events. They both also ham it up a bit for the audience. It's really where the comparison ends. I mean, here we have Zack waking up at 7 and throwing off his covers, and using non-traditional means to show off his dream girl. Ferris Bueller didn't do that. In the movie?
Tootsie, goodbye.
I hate the Ferris Bueller TV show! You may recall way back in episode 1 of the current season, where we discussed that Dancing to the Max wasn't the originally intended pilot for Saved by the Bell. The producers were right in thinking that Dancing to the Max was the stronger episode to introduce the cast. Well, this episode, King of the Hill, is now airing as the 15th episode of the season and takes place on the first day of school. So how do we navigate that chronological anomaly?
I'll never forget the day Slater showed up.
Okay, a voiceover forcing a flashback episode. At school, Mr. Belding already has Zack in his sights.
You've lost at least 10 pounds. Must have been working out.
Well, Mrs. B and I did take up synchronized swimming. You haven't seen Dirty Dancing till you've seen us underwater.
Gosh dang! Lisa's got a problem.
What, did Revlon discontinue your lipstick, Lisa?
We've heard something like this before.
Lisa, what happened to you? I kicked the TV and sprained my ankle. I was watching the new Revlon commercial and they discontinued my nail polish.
It's not Revlon, so what is it?
They gave me a locker surrounded by nerds.
Yes! I friggin' love Lisa. Zack promises to get her a locker change in exchange for a favor. Speaking of lockers, Zack wants one next to Kelly. But then Slater shows up and Zack meets his new nemesis. Slater doesn't want to give up his locker, and why the F would he? So Zack makes an offer.
And I'll give you a genuine hall pass with the principal's signature.
That ain't Belding's signature. This is Belding's signature.
Okay, new guy, but how did you get that?
Look, kid, I've been in 14 schools in the last 3 years. I've got hall passes in 5 languages.
Well, that didn't answer the question. Hold on. An attitude in a leather jacket and an unfathomable number of school transfers? I'm getting serious Deke vibes, yo.
Well, according to this, he's had 8 new school environments in the last 2 years.
Yes, but the ninth could be his lucky charm.
We know from Saved by the Bell's rock-solid continuity that Zack fails to secure a locker next to Kelly. His next goal is getting a seat next to her in algebra. Jessie outright refuses to give Zack her seat, but Lisa agrees to switch as part of her favor to Zack. But Zack can't even go a full freaking minute sitting next to freaking Kelly before freaking Slater convinces freaking Mr. Dewey to have Zack switch freaking seats. This Slater dude is just diabolical. And we've seen that wave before. They even have similarly colored shirts. The episode then spends nearly 2 minutes in the max, all for yet another setup for a Slater ambush. I mean, we get it. Slater's dimples and tight shirt are better than Zack's dyed hair and puffy jacket. We could almost skip this scene altogether, but there are a few things to note. First, the writers have Max do that hand gag that we see done in the later produced episode, The Election. 2, I thought this shot looked empty and realized that the payphone is missing. And finally, Zack asks Kelly about her summer, and she says she flew to Florida to attend a volleyball camp. She couldn't have attended one in California? Of course not. It had to be Florida, so the writers could give us this mental picture.
Must have been hot.
Well, it wasn't the heat, it was the humidity. You wouldn't believe how your t-shirt clings right to your body.
And if we can have one pointless scene where nothing truly happens except for a sex joke, why not another? Zack is in full scheme mode and uses Screech to trick Kelly into being late for class.
Did I get it? It was wonderful. Was it good for you?
How did that feel?
More.
Okay, shut up, Dustin Diamond. The ruse so totally works. And Kelly is super late for class.
Miss Kapowski, you've been with me before. You know the rules. If you're not in your seat when the bell rings, it's detention.
Did I hear that right?
If you're not in your seat when the bell rings, it's detention.
So Kelly gets detention because she wasn't in her seat when the bell rang, which means that the moment she qualified for detention was way back here. Which makes this whole scene worthless. Now, maybe Zack didn't know the exact parameters that qualified tardiness for a detention, but the writers did. Having the teacher expressly state that detention is earned if your butt isn't in your seat at the bell completely discounts this minute and a half of screen time. The teacher should have said that detention is given if you are tardy by over a minute, or just generally, you get detention for being this late to class. Regardless, Zack got his crush a detention. Cool move, bro. Boom! We're now in Miss Simpson's class, and Zack does his absolute best to goof off and earn a detention. Boom! What the crap? I've never been interrupted by my own gag before. Where was I? So Zack's trying to earn a detention. As we all know, Miss Simpson is way deaf, which might be why she's given the same jokes to work with.
Well, I suppose they're not going to ring the bell, so we'll start anyway. We'll begin as soon as the bell rings. It's the first day. They must have forgotten the bell. Do we all know who the author is? William Shakespeare. Shame on you. William Shakespeare. Who was the author of Hamlet? Anyone?
William Shakespeare.
No one knows? Then I'll have to tell you. William Shakespeare.
With Miss Simpson being so deaf, Zack's cutting up is getting him nowhere. Frustratingly, it isn't until he inadvertently drops his Shakespeare book that he's, boom, sent to the principal's office.
Get thee to Belding.
Well, alright. Let's see if Zack can get detention with Kelly. Don't look at the camera, bro. It seems, however, that Zack has more work to do, as Mr. Belding is hesitant to just hand out detentions all willy-nilly. Now, he wants to counsel and hopefully rehabilitate Zack. Zack stoops to groping and dropping all of Mr. Belding's crap and finally earns that detention. So, what does Zack think detention looks like with Kelly? Oh, you know, something along the lines of an elven princess who is just absolutely randy for some Zack man and who has a desire for offspring that isn't immortal?
Yes, I shiz in my pants.
Why keep my love waiting any longer?
Boom! Slatered. Apparently, Mr. Belding had excused Kelly from detention upon hearing that she saved Screech from that, coyote bone thing. Unaware of this, but wanting to beat Zack at his own game, Slater earned detention by mooning a teacher. Things start to get chippy when Mr. Dewey shows up.
I don't care. I'm tired, I have a toothache, and I have to go home and pump iron.
In the end, the episode showcases the genesis of the Zack and Slater rivalry. It's probably obvious by now why the producers didn't trust this episode to be a viewer's first impression. Allow me to belabor this point another minute or two. It's hard to strike gold in a pilot episode, as the tone of a series can shift and adjustments may need to be made to the character interactions and what producers want to see portrayed. We know some bits from this episode worked because we've seen similar bits in other episodes that had been produced later. But we also had a lot of filler. We also had some jokes aimed more to adults, which makes sense since the plan was to air the pilot in primetime. One element of the writing I find funny is showcased in Zack's Daydream.
I love you, Master.
Master? I think we know who wrote Wendell's script in the Zack tapes.
Waitress!
What can I get you, Master?
Yeah? Another thing that tainted this episode was the camera crew. Apparently the crew had come from a static game show set. They weren't used to all the moving around Saved by the Bell required. I mean, we've never had this many boom mics before. There are also several moments throughout the episode where the camera zooms at odd times or shakes. We even get some shots where you can see above the set. The crew just wasn't used to this type of a shoot. Needless to say, the crew was replaced.
I don't like that boy.